Welcome to the In My Opinion show with host Ronald Berry Robinson and friends, seen on the internet 24 hours, 7 days a week. The In My Opinion show is also seen on Comcast Cable Television Channel 17 Flint, Michigan, every Saturday at 6 p.m. and Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. The In My Opinion show is seen on Comcast Cable Television Channel 68 Detroit, Michigan, 7 days a week. Consult your community calendar. I have an excellent guest today. He is from Saginaw, Michigan, and he's an excellent guest because he's widely read, he's widely educated, and he lectures from time to time on various subjects such as Black history, on American history, and healthcare, and the likes in education. So much of what we know today is believed to be grounded in politics and has nothing to do with the truth or the facts. I'm going to welcome Saleem Manan. Saleem, welcome
to the show. Thank you.
Today we'll have an excellent show. As I said, so much of what we know today is based on politics, perceptions, and very seldomly is grounded in truth or the facts. Now, we're going to talk about a number of those phenomena. For example, the first thing I would like to talk about is how the country will transform itself by the year 2050, in which white Americans will no longer be the arithmetic or political majority of the country. I also would like to have you kind of comment on it. What should be this discussion that we have now in your generation, right now, that we ought to be having so that we can maintain a free and democratic society 37 years from now?
Right. Yes, sir, that's a good conversation, and it has so many aspects. I think for your viewers that's out there, I think it's important to emphasize to them that we're living in a wonderful time. If you look at it, we're living longer, healthcare is better, technology and traveling, the world is now smaller because you can go places. There's so many opportunities out there now. I want to point that out first. And then there's some bad things that's happening too. But I think what we need to look at and focus on is being self-sufficient more. When we look at African Americans, when we talk about their situation, we need to put an emphasis on not so much what can government or politics do for us, but what can we do for our country. We have the same ability. And in order for us to realize our treasures, you have to be a person that's giving and seeing how you can participate and make things better. I think President Obama is a wonderful example. He started out as a community organizer, and I think that we should never forget that, and that's important.
But, Saleem, as we move closer to 2050,
yes, sir.
There are going to be power shifts. People won't be able to live the way that they haven't. And there will be debts to be paid because there are people who still think that they didn't get their 40 mules in an acre, 40 acres in a mule. Right. And then there are those who think that the country has trounced on them. And when we have these shifts, cultural shifts, what should be our, as black men and women, culture, I should say, what should we bring to the table to assure that we maintain this democracy as a free and democratic society?
Well, I guess I can answer that by saying that there was a few years ago, I think Ebony Magazine had an article out called The Browning of America. Mm-hmm. And that's with the immigrants from Mexico and other places that is fastly coming upon us. But I don't think that will figure in too much in terms of what you outline, a power shift. What I like to focus on is education.
That's a big one.
Right. That's the thing that we're lacking right now. And when you look at it in terms of the global industrial nations and our nation, other nations are exceeding past us when it comes to education.
Yes, it is.
We're starting to focus on it now,
Sure.
and I like that focus.
Sure.
So I think the key to it, and that's why I'm optimistic, as soon as we can get the knowledge to the people, one of the things that I find is a problem is a lot of people who are so-called leaders don't have enough confidence in those people who live in the communities who don't have the education. And they are the ones that's really given a responsibility to raise the community. But when you talk to them, I had one gentleman say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Mm-hmm. And that again tells me they don't have much confidence or faith in those people. And I'm not that person, because I had a life like that, and something reached me and woke me up. And now I aspire to education, and I feel the same thing can happen.
Manan, have you been in the classroom recently?
Yes, sir.
Have you tried to teach, say, in a classroom in Saginaw or Buena Vista?
Do
you know what the culture's like?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Would you try to explain?
It's a difficult culture, very difficult. But if the teacher is committed, and this is a word that's through over quite a bit, if that teacher is committed and has love in his heart for those students, then he can disseminate that knowledge. But it's a way that you have to teach the young people that's there today. You have to come to the table equipped to whet their appetite, to bring them in. And there are teachers, there are successful teachers that's working. And I've seen one on TV recently that's able to have everyone graduate at that school. This was a sister. I forget what city it was.
Chicago.
Yeah, and she did an excellent job. So if that person is committed, yeah, there's something you can do. Booker T. Washington had a worse situation than what they're facing.
Yeah, but people were more self-disciplined in those days.
Yeah, they were, but they had less in terms of what they were in terms of technology, in terms of learning tools, books, and laws were not in their favor. Jim Crow.
Now we're talking about one of the aspects of what African Americans should bring to the table.
Right.
As we move toward the point when we will accept a third or a fourth of the leadership responsibilities for running this country, based on population.
Right.
Okay? Now, we have to have people well prepared to do that.
Right.
We have to have people who are willing to compromise, to sit down at the table,
right.
to negotiate, and stuff like that. We have to minimize and ameliorate those issues that drive us to madness when we sit down at the table, and can never get past that race thing. Right. So the point is, here, as we look at the culture of the classroom today, many students do not listen to their teachers. Mm-hmm. And let's look at the SAT test and the MEP scores and the ACT test.
Yes, sir.
And compare them to the national norm.
Right.
Do you think they're dismal?
Yes, but there's some questions even on the part of the people who are superintendents who are questioning whether the importance of these tests, of training children to these tests, and do these tests really tell you where your children are? Because they ask some questions that socially their culture don't even experience. So that is.
But I submit to you, I talk to people from Africa. Now we're just having fun with this, okay?
Okay. Yes, sir.
And people want to see us take those issues that you feel very strongly about and you believe in and elucidate and share with them. So please feel free to do that. But I've talked to Africans from Africa, to several countries in Africa, and I asked them, if you were given a test and you want to go to American schools, do you care about what's on the test? They said, no, you just give me the test.
Yes.
And so we're bogging ourselves down in trivia over things. Now, like, for example, you can't skew mathematics. You can't skew things in the core curriculum.
Right.
Core curriculum, that's what drives education.
Right.
Like history, language arts, social studies, and mathematics. Those what drive our cultural society.
Yes, sir.
But so I would challenge the idea that tests are biased.
No, not biased, but let me say this. Let's say it another way. I believe the focus should be sociology. I think that's where we should begin. Again, I go back to not having enough confidence in those people that we wrote off, and them knowing who they are and what their possibilities are and what they can achieve. A lot of the people in the community and people that I come in touch with don't believe that they can measure up. They believe that they've been shortchanged. They believe that they
Now
are
that
inferior.
gets at the matter now. By
Right.
2050, we're going to still have some of these people
Well,
sitting at the table
No, I
who
think
feel that they were shortchanged?
I think that if we can get leaders, and it begins with reading, it begins with studying, and I'm recommending some books
Please do.
for people who want to embark on improving the situation. I'm recommending that they read something. Before you do anything, you have to study. I think the Bible says, study to show thyself approved, and rightly divide the word, and the workman need not be ashamed. Divide means take it to its lowest common denominator. So we need to read. And I think what we need to do is say now, our children, they're not feeling that they can achieve like other ones. What is the problem? Then here are some books that I can outline to them that every African American child who graduates should read these books. I was on the plane recently with this Caucasian young lady, and I remember she spilled something, and I helped her. So me and her, we started talking, and she was reading The Great Gatsby. I think that's the name of it. They have a list of books that their children read, but we don't have.
Yeah.
You know, the Polish. If I would go to them, they have a list of books. Right. They have a list of books, that they read. We don't have a list of books that our children should read. Now, when you and I were in high school, African Americans were not even mentioned. They were not mentioned. All I had was Sambo would come in and out of the stories in elementary. But other than that, there were no positive images. We had Tarzan. And the only image I had of African Americans or Africans was that they were bones in their nose and cooking white people. That's all we had. We had no positive images. That still is existing today. We have to have a list of books that our people read. And I recommend for your listeners and the watchers of your program to read these books. One of them is, if I can, Up From Slavery, Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, Booker T. Washington.
Read that book.
Yeah.
Read that book, Up From Slavery. Mm-hmm. The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. You know who he is?
Yes.
He's a great historian, an African-American historian. He is credited with being the founder of Black History Month. Carter G. Woodson and the Miseducation of the Negro. Read that book. And then read E. Franklin Frazier, The History of the Black Church. Read that book. So make a list of that. E. Franklin Frazier, The Black Bourgeoisie. And there are many other books that I would outline to them that they would read. Frederick Douglass' autobiography. You need to read it. These are books that our children, I'm sure the Polish, the Irish, and all of them have books that their children read. These will strengthen them the way that they have strengthened you and me. This will strengthen.
Folks, I think my speaker's filibustered on me, and you want to remember, I said that he was widely read, and if you need to go back and replay this to find out what those books are, then you should probably make note of it. But he has a lot to talk about. But as we move closer to, and this is a man I would say has no bias bones. He is not racist. No. But he has a good appreciation for cultural differences, for changes, right, and for education. So I appreciate having him on the show, and he's a great mentor for all of our guests, including those on this program today. But I'd like to move on to just kind of summarize what we talked about. Mm-hmm. Now, encapsulate what you think. Say in 50 words, can encapsulate what you think that we ought to be doing as a black culture as we move closer to the point where we accept a large share of leadership responsibility for the United States.
I think a wonderful example is the forming of this country. Give me liberty or give me death. Independence. We fought a country, and I read where some African Americans were the first one to lose their life in that war for independence. Yes. So what I'm saying is the same kind of independence that America won, that propelled her great, is what we need to focus on.
Okay.
How do we become independent? How do we become industrious? How do we become productive? The cities are failing because there's no tax base. White businesses have left. African Americans are not establishing business that will bring in the tax revenue that's needed to have the books for our children and the schools that they need. We have got to become more industrious. We have got to establish businesses in our community so that we can have the revenue. And we got to support businesses in our community. And we're not doing that. Those are things that we have to do.
You're probably transitioning into my next question, which is, do you think, when you take a look at this education that you say that we need to achieve for we to become better leaders, to
Right.
become better parents, to become better citizens, to better providers, and so on and so forth. So we mix in with the rest of the world in a very competitive way for the resources that the world has left, and that's available to all of us if we strive to share them.
Right.
But they won't come to us unless we do that striving.
Right.
Do you think at all, Saleem, that for some reason the last generation has failed its a younger generation?
In some ways, we have.
Explain.
Well, I think, but this is controversial, but I think it's
That's all right. That's why we're here. Yeah.
And but I think that many of the leaders that came into our community, African American leaders, now that I'm talking about, that's in key positions,
Sure.
I think many of them took the focus away from where we should have been in terms of education. And I use, for example, in Saginaw, we had a school called Arthur Hill Tech for many years. It was an all-boys school. That school focused on training young men for skilled trade jobs. That means they became welders, they became electricians, they became those kind of things. You know, they learned early on how to master a skill. And all those men I can point to are very successful. All those men went on to establish businesses because they went into skilled trade, they made enough money, they had the capital to start their own businesses. They opened up restaurants, they opened electrical shops, they were very successful. That school closed and we started getting African American administrators in our schools. That focus on getting your hands dirty and learning the skill went away.
Yes.
You know, they didn't focus on, you're going to work for a Fortune 500, you're going to wear a suit every day, you're going to be a doctor and a lawyer. So now when work is done in our community, or putting a roof on or fixing a porch, we got to call somebody outside the community to come in and do the work. And our young men who could be excellent carpenters are standing on the corner looking at this guy not knowing how to fix a porch or put a washer on a leaking sink. So to focus on teaching them to learn those trades. Once you get a trade, you can buy an education.
Now, you know, in past, and we still do that today, we blame everybody else, all systems. We blame government for our failure,
Right,
our
yes,
own
sir.
failures.
Yes, sir.
We blame government for the failure of our students.
Right.
But should we accept some of the responsibility?
Yes, sir. You're exactly
should we
right.
energize
Right.
ourselves to simulate or emulate what other people do to be successful,
Right.
make their kids successful
Exactly.
in every detail of the work?
That's the first step to turning around this situation, is that leaders have got to be honest with themselves. I'm talking about ministers, I'm talking about superintendents, I'm talking about anybody in the community as a leader. They have got to look at themselves and ask themselves this question. How am I contributing to this? Is there something that I'm doing wrong? They need to go back and study themselves again and see if am I doing it. Prophet Abraham, you know him.
Yes.
Prophet Abraham, great man, great, wonderful man. One thing that was great about Abraham was when he called out to God, he said, God, forgive me, for I wronged my own soul. He didn't blame his wife. He didn't blame nobody. He said himself. We're not doing that. We're blaming everyone else. Or a man blame his wife. Oh, reason I'm not doing what I'm doing because God didn't give me the right wife. That's why I'm acting this way. We blame it. But you have to begin, ministers, I'm talking about, everybody's out there. Look at yourself. Then go back and research what you're doing and ask, what can I do to be better? It's like I'm at home with my family. If I have a disruption or something's going wrong, the first thing I do is I take a look at myself. I take inventory. What is it I'm doing wrong? And then I'll see. Then I begin to set things in motion that way. We're not doing that yet. Some are. Some wise leaders are doing that. And that's a good sign that we're going to move forward when you see that happen.
Well, that's interesting because I think, well, what would you like to see us as African Americans do more of to enhance the ability of our young people who will live most of their lives in this century to succeed, become better, become better Americans, to live in harmony as our resources decline and the population rises. That's a complex phenomenon that we have to deal with. That bodes really crisis.
Right.
Should we allow it to
It's,
creep up on us without planning?
It's so wonderful what you bring up now, and I think you are a recipient of it. And that is one of the main things that we have to have is that African Americans have not fully taken ownership of this country. That's theirs.
Would you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
I said Africans haven't adequately taken ownership of their country.
How do you do that?
We have to tell them, because some of them are still thinking, well, this the white man's country, or this not mine. And that's why neighborhoods are this way, you know. But they still think because of what America did in its history that it's bad, and we only focus on the bad. But there's so much good here, and you have to build on that. And it's our country. We respond when we have to go and defend it because we fought in every war for her. But we have not taken the healthy patriotism that we should have as a people. We haven't kissed the flag and grabbed it. That's the only way you're going to benefit. You walk into these universities knowing you own it. This is your country. I got a share in it, and I want to do my part. That's the way we get it back. So we need a healthy patriotism for our great nation.
So you would suggest to young people who are watching you today that they should take their opportunities to serve in the military, as all Americans should.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying all Americans. Right now we have it's a volunteer.
Volunteer.
But I think that's a good thing. But if you look at our country, we do that. We fought in every.
Yeah, we do. But I'm talking about you hear so many kids who say, "Well, I'm not going to the military."
Right. That's not.
What am I going?
You derived all
They're
the
not
benefits.
fighting for me and
That's not
stuff
good.
like that.
Right.
Is that healthy?
No, it's not healthy. You have a responsibility. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you got me
That's all
excited. Right. You have a responsibility. You enjoy the fringe benefits of this nation. You also have a right to defend her. Right.
Yes.
And we do that.
Yes, we do.
Right.
So you would say to students out there today,
right,
that the country is worthwhile saving. It's worthwhile working for. It's worthwhile sharing.
Yes.
It's worthwhile for you to grasp.
Right.
Grasp it as yours.
Yes.
Shared with others.
Right.
And this is and Americans who say are not doing that. African Americans are not doing that. They've never done that. They say, well,
they've done it. Now, I don't want to say they
country.
didn't do it. Now, I don't want to ignore the good people. We've talked about it. Me and you talked about Colin Powell.
Oh yeah,
Condoleezza Rice and others.
But we don't.
Not adequately. Let's say we're not adequately
done
that. Not adequately taking ownership. And when we do that, then we would transform these communities. When we take responsibility.
Just thinking extemporaneously. What does it mean to be a Black American?
What does it mean to
What does it mean to be a Black American? Do we have a culture that's well defined, like the boundaries around this table, or like the boundaries around American Indians, or Hispanics, or Arabs, or whites, or Jews?
Right.
Do we have a boundary? Do we have a well-defined?
But that's why I talked about sociology is so important. Why it's so important.
Explain.
Because that any people that don't have their culture in their own hands, then they would be like a leaf in the wind. That any time a wind blows, the leaf blows that way. The wind blows that way, it blows that way. It might blow it into trash. Unless you get a culture that's firm, then the wind won't blow it. And other people can come in and they can determine what our culture is.
Do you think we should have this kind of a culture before we move into an area where we accept strong leadership of this country?
I'm sorry?
Do you believe that we ought to have a culture defined in terms of rigidly defined as we move closer and closer to the paradigm shift?
Yes, you have to. The Polish identified their culture.
How do you think our culture right now is fragmented?
Because we have not fully grasped a lot of people get. When they're looking back, they're thinking that we made no contributions, that we none did anything of consequence, that we don't know our history, we have not studied our history.
Yeah, but we know that that's not true. We
Right.
made tremendous contributions.
Right.
But I mean, within ourselves, how do we define ourselves? How do we define ourselves as an integer of the culture of everybody else's? Well defined. We can't. We have music here. We have football, basketball. We have tremendous crisis with healthcare and with violence and stuff like that. That does not define a culture.
Right.
So what do we have to do to make sure that we do define the culture that we so aptly look for by 2050?
Again, it begins with I think that you are the benefit of, and I'm a recipient of also, and that's strong families. The focus on families, and the focus I would go to fathers, particularly fathers, brothers. Them taking responsibility for their children and providing for their families and protecting them.
Saleem, I have to cut you off. You've been a great guest. I hope you'll come back again. I know our audience really enjoyed your conversation on the In My Opinion show that's seen worldwide. I hope you'll come back with us. And now it's time to bring the show to a close.
Yes, sir.
Until next time, stay focused.